In the quiet darkness of August 8, 1963, a train moved steadily through the English countryside. It was a Royal Mail train, traveling from Glasgow to London, carrying something extremely valuable, millions of pounds in cash. To the outside world, it was just another normal journey, but hidden in the shadows, a group of men were waiting. This was the beginning of the legendary Great Train Robbery. Behind this bold plan was a man named Bruce Reynolds. He was not an ordinary criminal. He was calm, patient, and very intelligent. He believed that if you planned something perfectly, you wouldn't need violence. And that's exactly what he did. For months, Reynolds and his gang studied the train. They learned its route, its timing, and most importantly, its weaknesses. They discovered that the train carried large amounts of money regularly, especially after bank holidays. During those times, cash would pile up because banks were closed. This meant one thing: more money than usual. Even better, the gang found out something shocking. There were no proper security systems on the train, no alarms, no armed guards protecting the cash. It was an easy target, if handled correctly. Reynolds gathered a team of around 15 men. Each one had a specific role. Some were experts in signals, others in driving, and some were there just to move the heavy bags of cash. This wasn't chaos. This was a carefully organized operation. The plan was simple but brilliant. Instead of attacking a moving train, they would stop it first. Late at night, the gang went to a quiet railway track. It was far from towns and people. Perfect for what they were about to do. There, they tampered with the railway signals. They changed the light from green to red. To a train driver, a red signal means one thing: stop immediately. As the train approached, everything looked normal. But then the driver saw the red light ahead. He had no reason to suspect anything unusual. Following standard rules, he slowed the train and brought it to a complete stop. That was the moment the gang had been waiting for. Within seconds, they moved into action. Wearing masks and gloves, they climbed onto the train. They worked quickly and quietly. There was no shouting, no gunfire, just controlled movements. They overpowered the train crew and took control of the engine. The driver was confused and frightened, but he had no choice. The gang forced him to cooperate. Time was everything. They knew they only had minutes before something could go wrong. The robbers headed straight for the carriage carrying the money. Inside, they found what they had hoped for: bags filled with cash. A huge amount. More than they had ever seen before. Working together, they began unloading the money. Bag after bag was passed down in a fast-moving chain. Every second counted. Every movement was planned. In less than 15 minutes, it was done. Over £2.5 million had been taken. And then, just as quickly as they appeared, they vanished into the night. No alarms had been triggered. No shots had been fired. It felt like the perfect crime, but sometimes even the best plans carry the smallest cracks, and those cracks can change everything. After the robbery, the gang moved quickly away from the railway. Everything had gone according to plan. No alarms, no resistance, no delays. They had just carried out one of the biggest heists in history. But now came the most dangerous part: escaping. The group split into smaller teams and drove through dark country roads, careful not to attract attention. Their destination was a quiet farmhouse hidden deep in the countryside. It was called Leatherslade Farm, and it had been chosen long before the robbery. This was their safe place, a place to hide, rest, and most importantly, divide the money. They arrived. The tension slowly turned into excitement. Bags filled with cash were carried inside. For the first time since the robbery, the men could breathe. They had done it. Inside the farmhouse, the gang began counting the money. Piles of notes covered the tables and floors. It was more than they had imagined: over £2.5 million. Some of the men laughed in disbelief. Others sat quietly, staring at the money, trying to understand what they had just achieved. This was not a small crime. This was history. But even in that moment of success, danger was already getting closer. The plan was to stay at the farmhouse only for a short time, just enough to organize the money and prepare for the next step. After that, they would disappear, each man going his own way, making it harder for the police to track them. But things didn't go as planned. Instead of leaving quickly, the gang stayed longer than they should have. Maybe they felt too safe. Maybe they were too confident. Or maybe they just wanted to enjoy their success a little longer. Whatever the reason, that decision would cost them everything. As the days passed, the men relaxed. They ate together, talked, and even joked about the robbery. The tension was gone, replaced by a false sense of security. And then came the mistake. To pass time, some of the gang members decided to play a simple board game, Monopoly. It seemed harmless. Just a game to relax. But they didn't realize something important. They had removed their gloves. As they played, they touched the cards, the dice, and the board itself. Fingerprints, clear and perfect, were left behind on the surface. At that moment, they didn't think it mattered, but it would soon become the key to their downfall. Meanwhile, the police had already launched a massive investigation into the Great Train Robbery. This was no ordinary case, it was a national emergency. Hundreds of officers were working day and night searching for clues. They checked roads, questioned witnesses, and followed every possible lead. Then finally, they found something. The farmhouse. When police officers arrived at Leatherslade Farm, the gang was gone. The robbers had already left, realizing they couldn't stay any longer, but they had left something behind. Evidence. Inside the farmhouse, the police found food, clothing, and signs of recent activity. It was clear this was the gang's hideout. And then they found the Monopoly board. It looked ordinary, but to investigators it was gold. Fingerprints covered it. The police carefully collected every single print. These prints would soon be matched with known criminals. Names would be revealed. Identities uncovered. The perfect escape was starting to break. The gang thought they had disappeared without a trace, but they had unknowingly left behind the one thing they could never take back: proof. After discovering the farmhouse, the police finally had what they needed: solid evidence. The fingerprints found on the Monopoly board became the turning point in the investigation of the Great Train Robbery. What once seemed like a perfect crime was now slowly falling apart. Detectives worked day and night, matching the fingerprints with criminal records. One by one, identities began to appear. Faces replaced mystery. Names replaced shadows. The hunt had truly begun. Across the country, police teams were sent out to track down the gang members. Some robbers were caught quickly, unable to escape far. Others tried to hide, changing locations, staying with friends, or using fake identities. But the pressure was everywhere. Newspapers were full of headlines about the robbery. The public was watching closely. Every move the police made became national news. Soon arrests started happening one after another. Each capture brought the police closer to the full picture. The gang that once worked together so perfectly was now breaking apart. Fear replaced confidence. Trust turned into silence. Some members tried to run abroad, hoping to escape the law completely. For a short time, a few managed to stay hidden, but the world was becoming smaller for them. Police forces worked together across borders, sharing information and tracking movements. No one could run forever. Even the mastermind, Bruce Reynolds, managed to escape for a while. He left the country and lived under different identities, moving from place to place. For years, he avoided capture. But living on the run is never easy. Eventually, he made a mistake, and when he did, the police were ready. Reynolds was arrested and brought back to face trial, just like the others. The courtroom became the final stage of the story. As the trials began, the public followed every detail. People were shocked by how carefully the robbery had been planned. Some even admired the boldness of the crime. But the law saw it differently. This was a serious offense. When the judge announced the sentences, they were harsh. Many of the gang members were given up to 30 years in prison. At that time, such long sentences for robbery were almost unheard of. It sent a clear message: no matter how clever the crime, justice would catch up. But the impact of the robbery was not only on the criminals. The train driver, who had been forced to stop that night, suffered deeply. Although no shots were fired, the experience was terrifying. Being suddenly surrounded and controlled left him in shock. He never fully recovered. The emotional trauma stayed with him for the rest of his life. It was a reminder that even non-violent crimes can still cause real harm. As the years passed, the story of the robbery only grew bigger. Books were written. Films were made. People continued to talk about it, fascinated by its scale and precision. It became one of the most famous crimes in history, not because of violence, but because of how carefully it was executed. Yet, in the end, one small mistake changed everything. A simple board game. Fingerprints left behind without a second thought. The gang had planned every detail of the robbery, but they forgot one thing: no plan is perfect. And that is why the Great Train Robbery is still remembered today, not just as a daring heist, but as a perfect plan, undone by a simple mistake.